I do great on the visual. But if you add an audio layer and you're expecting me to understand the audio and the visual at the same time, my visual will cut out. I'll still be seeing it, but I won't process. But my audio takes over. So I don't believe in my mind I can do audio and video at the same time. I'm kind of like an old school TV. You either get in the video or you get in the audio. I'm not getting both. Maybe in a dream I get both, but at least when I'm conscious, it's either the audio or it's the video.
If you would like to support the efforts and research we are doing here on this podcast, make a donation using the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes or go to buymeacoffee.com/Shane'sBrain. Thank you. Aphantasia is a condition characterized by an inability to visualize mental images in one's mind. If you have just discovered that you or someone you love has aphantasia, or if you're just fascinated by the subject in general and love learning more about it, you are in the right place. The Discovering Your Mind podcast delves into all aspects of the mind's eye, including aphantasia, hyperphantasia, and everything in between. Welcome to the Discovering Your Mind podcast, brought to you by shanesbraindomain.com. I am your host, Shane Williams, also known as Shane's Brain. I'm joined today by my co-host, Cole Williams. How you doing there, Cole?
I'm good. Hi, guys.
All right, and today we are talking with the one and only Daniel Faust, who we just barely met a few seconds ago. How you doing there, Daniel?
I'm doing good. I'm not the only one, but I am one.
That's right. The reason we introduce people that way is because what you're about to find out is that your mind is pretty unique. We like to celebrate everybody's uniqueness and differences here. So we're excited to find out how your mind works.
Awesome.
All right. So to start out, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do for a living and such?
Yeah, Daniel Faust. I've been a military Air Force member for roughly 24 years. The current job I'm in is a group training manager. So imagine taking a bunch of jobs which are within a business and you have training for them and you send them to different courses and you also do leadership courses. My job is to get them to all the courses, track their training, and make sure that they get where they want to be in their career.
What about interests and hobbies? What do you like to do for fun?
When I get a chance, I like to hike. I haven't biked in a long time, but I really like biking, reading, video games, virtual reality video games specifically. So if you do play on the Oculus, DanielFaust.33, would love to connect you there. I also like teaching and speaking. It's part of my business, but if I could do it as a hobby too, I would do that also.
In this episode, we will be referring to what we call the Apple Graph. If you would like to view the Apple Graph to play along and better understand what we're talking about, you can find it on shanesbraindomain.com in the Aphantasia and Beyond section. If you are unable to view the Apple Graph for whatever reason, it is a graph divided into 6 sections. In the number 6 section, there is a very detailed image of a red apple. In the number 5 section, it is the same image but with less detail. Number 4 is still in color but has less detail and more basic shapes instead of detailed hues and gradients. Number 3 is the less detailed apple but in gray tones without the color. Number 2 is a simple outline of the apple. And number 1 is blank, indicating no visualization whatsoever. This is called aphantasia.
I want you to visualize a red apple in your mind.
Okay.
All right, now we are going to share a graph with you. And I want you to tell me which one of these apples best represents what you saw in your mind's eye.
I would say between 5 and 6. So if I had to lean towards the number 5, would be the closest one. I'm not a fan of red apples either, so probably that's why I don't visualize it as deeply as others. Yeah, usually I'm more vivid the more I'm interested in something. So if you would have said a Granny Delicious apple, the green one, I probably would have visualized it with more acuity. But with a red one, since I don't like it as much, I probably, It's like the same thing if you tell me something, visualize something you hate. I probably don't want to, so I'm probably not going to visualize it as high. It's something I love. Like I can visualize my wife right now in full detail. Tell me to visualize the woman that dumped me when I first met her. God, I don't want to. And I'm hoping I'm forgetting each and every day, so.
Fair enough.
and I would hope people would go over and do that on the long term, because we stay in hate too long because we have that mind's eye too much on the negative and not as much on the positive.
Okay, so before we jump into more of these questions, have you heard of aphantasia before?
No. The funny thing is I have a mental health background. I'm familiar with retrograde amnesia, anterograde amnesia, learned all the mental health diagnoses when I worked in mental health on the active duty side of military. But yeah, I never heard that term before. That was new to me.
Yeah. So essentially when we talk about aphantasia, we're talking about a blind mind's eye. So on that Apple graph that you saw, people with aphantasia would report seeing a 1 or no mental image whatsoever.
Oh, yeah. My wife used to have that because my wife had dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia. They actually diagnosed her as a learning disability, NOS. And when we did that, the part of the dyslexia is like, how do you visualize something? She couldn't visualize nothing. God's healed her since then and through like mental health and spiritual healing. But when I first started dating her, she couldn't even visualize her favorite dessert. She could tell you facts, but she couldn't visualize it at all.
Interesting. So she had aphantasia, but no longer does.
Yeah, we got her diagnosed in Little Rock, Arkansas, because she was trying to go into the workplace, and this doctor had to come out of retirement after 35 years because he's never seen dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia all in one patient. So did like 5 hours of extensive tests, and one of the things that talks about in the book is like you can tell if somebody struggles in that realm is like when you say, hey, open your hand, close your eyes, and visualize your favorite dessert, and then describe it to me. And the more they can visualize, their hand will start moving, they'll start feeling weight, they'll start licking their lips because they can taste it. My wife just said, this is it. And it was just facts. And she's like, I said, can you feel the weight? No. Can you see it? No. Yeah, she couldn't see of that at all. It's such an amazing gift now. Now she's writing books, and she's even writing a fiction book now. So it's what an amazing transformation. So like I said, I never heard of the word, but I am familiar with the concept now that you mentioned it.
Okay. So do you think you got a pretty good handle on what aphantasia is?
Yeah. It's basically the spectrum of people going over and visualizing and whatnot. Some people's spectrum is higher and some people's lower. And how does it go over and work with their lives and learning and background and different things? That's what I think it is.
Yeah. We're not going to talk a whole lot about aphantasia today because we're going to be focusing more on how your brain works and discovering that. But we like to start with that kind of as a basis so that you can understand where I'm coming from as well and kind of a lot of the things we discuss on this podcast. So the first thing we'd like you to do is visualize a chicken in your mind.
Okay.
Is it like looking at a picture or more of just a thought or something else?
I saw it drawn out. I see the red little thing on top of its head, and then like the beak formed, and then the feathers, and I see it just standing in front of me, and I can visualize going in and out on the features, like if I wanted to look at the wings or if I wanted to go down to the feet, and I can see the color once I focus on it. In my mind's eye, it's stronger than what my eyes are closed. So I'm trying to use my eyes to visualize more. In my eyes, when they're closed, I just see like dots and pixels, but in my mind, I can see it more clearly. I don't see it moving. I don't see it talking. I don't see it animating because I just thought of the chicken. So good thing I didn't think of the plated chicken because I could have went either way, but
Right.
That's what I visualized in that regard. Is just it came in from my eye and it's like almost like drew in my face. And then the first thing was focuses on that red little thing on the top of its head. So I might be thinking of a rooster because I always get those confused with the chicken and the rooster. So I might have visualized a rooster.
How dare you?
Whoops, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. But yeah, accidentally visualized a rooster. Sorry.
Okay. So what was that thing you said about the dots and the pixels? Can you explain that again?
Yeah, when I close my eyes, it feels like dots and pixels of different colors come together into the image. So if I had to draw it, it would be like a green, red, black halo type image of it, like when I close my eyes. But in my mind's eye, I can see it more in depth. So sometimes I can visualize it more in detail when my eyes are closed. But this time around, I don't know if it was because of the monitor and looking at the light, kind of like when you look at the sun. When I closed my eyes to help myself visualize, I saw like green, red, and black like dots of a silhouette of the chicken.
Okay, that's really interesting. I've never heard anybody describe it like that before. So you're saying that what you see when your eyes are closed is separate from what you see in your mind's eye? They're two
Yeah,
different
yeah,
things?
yeah. I feel like I can, like, if I go on my wife right now, I could still just see a pixelated image of what my wife would look like with my eyes closed. I don't vividly see it like in 3D, like if it was like a photo or VR and anything else. But in my mind's eyes, I can visualize everything: the length of the hair, the graying of her hair recently because now she's starting to gray out. Even if I want to, I can go back on what an image looks like. So my wife at 18 years looks different than my wife that when I was 22. I can still visualize the first day when we got married and intimacy and all those other types of things. And then 18 years later, know how we both have changed. That's how I visualize. I'm like, when my eyes are closed, I'm seeing more of a pixelated image, but in my mind's eye, I can go into more detail. It doesn't come up like right now with my eyes open, but when my eyes are closed, it's almost like having two different images. I have the one that I'm visually seeing as my eyes are closed, and the one that my mind eye is making is different.
Okay. Thanks for that description. Yeah, I've never heard that before. That's interesting. So in your mind's eye, can you do that with your eyes closed or your eyes open?
It takes more energy to go over and make the pixelated image compared to the really in-depth one because I naturally visualize at higher. So I'm almost like going from like 480p to 4K. Like closing my eyes are like a 480p. It just barely, you can see it and you can say almost like Rochambeau ink blots, like this is this and this is this, but you're not going to see the detail. But when I go, I'm usually higher res. I'm at 4K in my mind's eye.
Okay. So generally when you're visualizing using your mind's eye, you do it with your eyes open.
I do my eyes open because I can pick it up more. Closing eyes for me keep me more focused, but I'm not visualizing as strongly. So if it was the apple and I was just closing my eyes under normal circumstances, I'd be like, yeah, probably would have been a 1 or 2. It would have been like a pixelated apple.
Okay. Interesting. That is very interesting.
Okay.
So if you visualize the chicken with your eyes open with your mind's eye, is it 2D or 3D?
Oh, it's 3D. It's 3D. I could go over and spin around it and everything else. I think it's also my exposure recently. I am a VR enthusiast and I love that. I play over 100 different games. So I think I've always could do that even before then, but it helps even more now because I can now visualize things more 3-dimensionally. But yeah, I can go around the chicken, spin around it. I could levitate over it if I wanted to and look at it from a different angle and whatnot. I do a lot of that stuff in VR too. So I think it helps immensely because then you can look at it from the different angles.
Does the image feel like it's in your mind or like it's projected out in front of you?
Sometimes I get so into my visuals that I feel like I'm looking at it from the distance and I can describe it. If it's just thinking of it as a regular thought, I would say no. But I could go over and now visualize it and say, hey, it's on top of my light right now, which I'm looking at, or it's on top of my desk. I could visualize it and say, hey, it's there. So I could see it. If I wanted to, I could say, hey, it's right here. And I could stroke the feathers if I wanted to. Like I could project the chicken and make it into my reality. That's how visual I am in my mind. I'm like, I could see it. I could see it going nuts right now, or I'm petting it and letting it sit on my desk. So.
Okay. What about manipulating it? Could you make it fly or put a vest and a tie on it or stuff like that?
I automatically did that when you say it. Anytime people say stuff, I auto visualize it. So I could see it flying. I could see putting on a vest. I could see it and animate it.
Would you say that the image is solid or transparent?
I don't see through it. I see it like I just see it like just what it is. So what it looks like in reality.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to visualize some animals that you're probably not very familiar with. And you just describe what you saw in your mind's eye, okay? First one, I want you to visualize a leafy sea dragon.
4 legs, probably about 5 to 10 centimeters, 2 to 4 inches tall, very greenish, like algae type look. Imagine like what the dragons look like in most of the movies in there, but small. I think it's super friendly and cute. kind of leafy in the sense of like it has like cuts and grooves of like what a leaf would look like, or maybe algae. I think it would look very soft to me, but probably a lot harder in scale. I don't know if it'd be scaly or not, but at least it looks soft for me. I think if it's smiling, I think if it like kind of a red, black, beady type eyes, but they look cute, even though it should look creepy. And I would think it would be very approachable until you actually put your hand out to it, and then it would be skittish and run away. That's what I would visualize it as.
All right, then the next one I want you to visualize is the Sri Lanka frog mouth.
I would just think it would have an obsessively big mouth. So just like a frog that would be more focused on mouth and maybe tiny little legs. That's all I'm visualizing. Like a big, huge, like overbearing, like, boy, could you have less mouth? Like, with like 4 little tiny legs and probably couldn't go that fast. It's kind of like if somebody has like an abnormally large growth on their body. I'm just thinking that whole frog is mouth and nothing but mouth, and everything else is focused on there. So that's the best visual I think I can give.
Okay.
So we just like to play around and see what your mind's going to do when it has no information to go off of. See what it can make.
Yeah. So. It was really interesting. So now it's like, it's still hard to, like, now that my mind's eye made that image and you show me the real image, it's hard to now pull that new image because now I have that burnt first image.
Right. And for those of you listening who are curious to what the actual creatures look like, Google it. So next, we'd like you to visualize any room at all.
Okay.
Can you zoom outside the room to visualize the entire exterior of the building?
Yeah. Like, you want me to go from like, I went from the room and I visually walked out and like out the door and now I'm like on the outside?
Yeah. Describe whatever you did.
Okay,
there's no right or wrong answers.
I was in my living room where the cat tree's over here, which is mangled and destroyed. Anybody that's listening to this podcast can buy me a cat tree. And then go from there. I have a big L-shaped gray couch, sectional, sits like 16 people with an ottoman. So I saw myself visualizing like floating through there, and I went through the couch. I went straight back almost on a diagonal angle out of there and through the wall. And now I'm like outside, like floating maybe about 6 to 12 inches off the ground, seeing the entrance of my door and seeing a little bit on the inside because the way I'm standing. And then I could see that I have my black steel chair outside. It's one of those cast iron old chairs. Woven through, looks like it's like those weaving like reef type thing. So that's what I visualize being outside right now.
Okay. Can you zoom out even further to see like the entire neighborhood or a larger area?
I would have to go up. So I can go up. A lot of the houses look the same from a higher view. 2/3 of them have solar panels on them. Other ones don't. If I fly over and go further out and I went to the other side of the base, the houses get more beautiful and they're bigger, but they're single family homes. I can also see some of the playgrounds that we have there. We have a plane park. We have a park that looks like shaped like C-17s, so like military aircraft. We have that. We also have an Oasis pool, and then we have a housing pool. The Oasis pool actually has one water slide and a water park, and then they have this big, huge pipe that shoots out a bunch of water so into the water park. We also have a little shopette, which is basically like a little convenience store on the base, and I can visualize that as kids going in and out of there. I do feel limited in my mind's eye in a sense of like, I will, if I'm traveling somewhere, if I've done the route, I will still fly in my mind's eye on the roads. I won't break the rules and just fly anywhere. I would literally go from street to street and then fly in just like I would drive. Yeah. So I sometimes I'm so linear because I am ADHD and autistic. I have some barriers on certain things. Like I can visualize a lot of amazing things, but like some things I'm like, if I haven't flown there, then I'm not going to imagine myself flying like an aircraft flying. I'm going to imagine myself more of a fly drive. I'd still be following rules and making turn signals and all that stuff. So
All right. So now I'd like you to visualize 3 blue dots.
Okay.
Now visualize 9 blue dots.
Okay.
Now visualize 100 blue dots.
Okay.
Now visualize 1,000 blue dots.
That one's hard, but I'm getting there.
Okay.
That one seems to be the hardest one.
Yeah. Can you describe what's going on in your mind and how you're trying to figure that out?
I went 1, 2, 3, and then when I went to 9, I just stacked 2 more to make it 9. And then when you said 100, I made 5 rows of 20, and then 1,000. I was like, what do I put in my mind? That would be a simple number that I could still visualize and not get overwhelmed with. So I didn't do, I couldn't figure out if I should do 10 and 100 rows, and would my mind like block me? Yeah, I kind of got blocked. I was like trying to do the math in my head to make the visualization come happen. It would be too many if I did with 5, and it would just extend. And it was almost like my mind was like stalling, like my visual picture was only so big because I guess I went so small, and then I was trying to make it bigger. And it was almost like, it's almost feeling like a hard drive. I was defragging / crashing at like the 1,000. I'm like, I could not process 1,000 dots. I remember even when I look at Excel, that's where I get locked into. I've worked a lot of documents in Excel, and I have to take it in small groupings. Like when I'm looking at data, I can't just go look at all the data. I have to focus in a small area. So my mind's eye, and actually my eyes, will focus on there. So since I had to go so fast, my mind could not process the 1,000, like to actually get it and visually see it and then like verify if I was at 1,000. It just started looking like a bunch of dots coming at me, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm at the number.
Share the gift of laughter with your children and grandchildren with books full of funny poetry and silly stories by Shane D. Williams, available on shanesbraindomain.com.
Is there always something visual going on in your mind? Do you feel like your visualization ever turns off?
It shuts off when I'm doing something that I know how to do very well or becomes monotonous. I would say my current job stifles my creativity and stifles my visualization. It takes me a lot more now than I used to 5 years ago. I went through 70 different jobs before I got this job. I actually almost went homeless a few times in getting out of active duty and now being a full-time reservist. So when I used to be in so many different types of jobs for work, I could be more creative and visualize more. But when you're in such a task-saturated job, at least for me, it restricts me. We were going to plan a brick and mortar business, and we stopped it for a season because we're just focusing on veteran transformation. But I could visualize that place coming into reality. And I actually had some people on board because I could able to describe it so well. But in the job, in this current job, that's another reason I want to get out, because my creativity, my financial limitations, all these other types of things, that kind of blocks my visualization. It's even hard for me. I know I can see way far out and like where my goals are, but it's hard for me to see the 0 to 3 months of getting out of it sometimes. Like if I'm at work and they're saying, hey, what would it look like 6 months from now? I can give you facts about it, what I want it to be. But when I'm in that work environment and I'm in that military uniform, I think it's hard for a lot of us veterans to do that. We can't, it's, I think one of the things too, is we get so into the routines, it's hard for us to visualize future things. We can visualize like pictures and whatnot, but I think a lot of veterans struggle with that. And that's why I help with transformation to get them outside of the box. But I know for my box, it's hard for me certain days. And I'm like, it's like, will this go over an end? That's even, I would say that in the mind's eye, that you like, I can't visualize past tomorrow, or once I'm out of it, I'm fine. I'm like, if I have an end date or something, like all these other jobs I had, they had end dates. I could visualize a lot more. I could be a lot more creative. But this job doesn't have an end date. I don't know if that helps or hurts that description at all.
No, thank you for those details. Would you say that you could think of nothing if you wanted to?
No, I'm always thinking of stuff, but I'm not visualizing it. It's more like facts, figures, things of that nature. And it's more of that. But when I get out of work, or if I have a good amount of time away, or if I get vacations reset me, I think when we're in places that we don't want to be and we feel trapped, I think our mind's eye and creativity and visualization cuts down drastically, because naturally I have a really high creative side. I just don't get to execute it. And then even when I execute it, my current leadership likes to execute their version. So even though I thought I was creative and strategic and everything else, they think of their version. So it makes it difficult. I think those type of environments, I think if you're in a more freeing environment, it's a lot easier. So I only get to practice it a little bit.
No, I like what you said. You touched on something that I think we don't often talk about a whole ton on the podcast, and something like I like to think about it as like the exhausted mind's eye. Like over time, the mind's eye can get tired and kind of like shut itself down. When it comes to your mind visualization, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much would you say it's like actual seeing, like reality?
I say a 7 to an 8. I can close my eyes in a room and walk it blind as long as people didn't change something in there. And then I can usually, if I sometimes practice that. I haven't practiced it in a long time, but sometimes I'll go in a room blind and just see if I can navigate it. So I will go my mind's eye and then be like, okay, I'm in this orientation of the room and everything else. And I'll walk through and then see on how far I can get. Because even in VR, sometimes like it will go black, like if you're not in the background. So I've walked through my house with the VR headset and the cameras were black. And I would then just walk. And then if I'm questionable, I'm like, oh, feel for my orientation to get back in my mind's eye. I'm like, oh, I'm here. And now I can continue to go. So I'd say a 7, sometimes an 8.
All right, now we're going to talk a little bit more about the mind audio. Would you say you have an inner voice?
Yeah, I mean, I talk to myself often too, and I can't hear everybody's voice in my head. I think mine's the loudest. I think I think for people that I'm closer to, I can hear different mind's audio of different voices.
Okay. So do you play out conversations in your mind?
I do. I have to watch this because sometimes they're negative tapes, especially with past and whatnot. I have to remind myself, I'm like, those are not true, even though those voices were loud in my past. I mean, and sometimes I'll take their words and then I'll make it in my voice. And I think that's self-deprecation sometimes. Like we can destroy ourselves. And sometimes they're not even our words. They were someone else's words. And then we make them in our voice.
Would you say there's always something audible going on in your mind? Like, does your mind ever shut up?
I don't do both at the same time. So when we're talking about the visuals and the audio, and I learned this in real life too. I have a funny story for this. So I used to be a air transportation guy. This is one of the many jobs I did. And you're driving military vehicles to military aircraft, loading pallets, boxes, all types of things. So big and small. Go watch those crazy videos on the airforce.com website. I did that type of stuff. When I was training for the job, they said, hey, you can take this class. I took the class, and there's a high line, which is like a dock, and then the big vehicle. I got so overloaded visually on the buttons and the pallets coming at me like WW speed, the sergeant started yelling at me. When he started yelling at me, all I heard is his audio and my visual cut out. So my highly visual mind, knowing all the buttons, didn't know anything. I'd start pressing buttons, so it got worse. He jumped in the cab, started flipping the right buttons, and he thinked continuing to yell at me as he was flipping those buttons would help me. At the first time, I'm thinking stress, panic, anxiety, and everything else. I'm like, okay, I don't like getting yelled at. I go to the aircraft now, and I'm 20 feet in the air with this thing, and I'm loading pallets to this aircraft, and I'm jacking it up too. He jumps in and starts yelling at me again. So the same thing happens. I'm visually seeing everything, but I'm not visually processing. All I hear is his audio, and I start pressing more buttons, and we almost dropped the pallet 20 feet in the air. Again, he caught it. I get back down. I lower the cab. I go back to my sergeant that's in charge of the whole unit, and I said, I suck at this. And I said, I've sucked at this for a long time. And he's like, yeah, you do suck at it. And it has been a long time. So I got to change career paths in the military from air transportation to a training manager. And that's what I do now. So I help people. A lot of that job is visual. I do great on the visual. But if you add an audio layer and you're expecting me to understand the audio and the visual at the same time, my visual will cut out. I'll still be seeing it, but I won't process. But my audio takes over. So I don't believe in my mind I can do audio and video at the same time. I'm kind of like an old school TV. You either get in the video or you get in the audio. I'm not getting both. Maybe in a dream I get both, but at least when I'm conscious, it's either the audio or it's the video. It's almost like my eyes go in while I'm trying to do it. It's almost like a hard drive crash. I can do the sound. I might see a static image real quick, but I'm not like seeing it moving. I can see images move when I see images move, but if a sound came by, because I usually get, my wife jokes around. I'm like, ooh, kitty. Anytime there's a sound, I go over there, and I lose everything else. My environment at work, I have to have a very quiet environment, but I got to have opportunities to walk away to get stimulus. Even as a mental health tech, I did this years ago. I could write the note like a hero to diagnose the patient, but I didn't connect with the patient. And when I connected with the patient, I didn't write the note. So I couldn't balance both. I am like the extreme monotasker. I'm not a multitasker. I'm a monotasker. Do one task at a time. It's I have a one task. If it's audible, it takes me a lot more work to do an audible task than it is to take a visual task. I can do a visual task way better. But if there's audio stimulus in there, it's taken me years to tune out. I've learned a little better, but yeah, I think I'm either one input or the other.
Okay. That is an interesting detail.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the mind audio on a scale from 1 to 10, how much is it like actual hearing?
I think when things trigger at me, it hears me, or the thoughts I have in my mind. So I would say on a typical day, it's probably a 4. I think if I'm in a neutral place, it could probably go to a 6 or a 7, but I always consider my visual way higher. I mean, I wouldn't rely on it to process information better. I mean, so I'm the person would need PowerPoint presentations. Like if they just said, like, listen to this audio book and hope to get it, I'm like, unless I'm writing down notes kinesthetically, I'm not going to get it. So I'd say a 4 overall.
Okay, now we are going to talk about some of your other senses.
All right.
In the brain. So I want you to visualize that you are at a movie theater concession stand and they just handed you a big tub of freshly popped buttery popcorn. Can you smell it in your mind?
Very denuded. My smell in real life is very denuded. So even when I sniffed as I saw that, it was very hard. It was like a denuded, light butter smell. And I know my wife would never put light butter. She would just trickle that thing to Kingdom Come. People would have to give her an AED. I mean, that's how much butter she likes.
Sorry, would you say on a scale from 1 to 10, how much is it like actual smelling?
I feel like it's a feeling and then a smell. So a 1 or a 2.
Okay. So pretty dim on that one.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, pretty dim. It's like in real life, my sense of smell and taste are very dim.
Okay. What about taste? Can you taste the popcorn in your mind?
Kind of tastes stale, but I guess I grew up with stale popcorn, so I'm going off that reference.
On a scale from 1 to 10 on that one, if you could rank it, how much is it like actual tasting?
Yeah, I think it's more of a simulated in mine. I'm going to say a 1. Yeah.
Okay. And finally, what about touch? Can you feel the popcorn on your hands or mouth?
Yeah, I'd say that one. Touch is usually high for me. So plus I don't like touch either. So I'm more prickly about it. I would say like a 7. If you said a hug, I could feel that and I'd feel pretty disgusted right now.
In this episode, we will be referring to the carnival picture. If you would like to view the carnival picture to play along and better understand what we're talking about, you can find it at shanesbraindomain.com in the Aphantasia section. If you are unable to view the carnival picture, it is a picture of a carnival at dusk with bright lights adorning carnival games and rides, including a large Ferris wheel, with many people walking around.
Can you put yourself in this picture?
On the Ferris wheel, in the top of the Ferris wheel, I'd be sweating profusely and I could see myself getting locked in that position, trying to breathe and not freak out. I like the enclosed ones than the one that's currently on there. I could see myself then getting transported back down to the bottom and finally calming down, being glad I can see everything else except for that. And I'm like, I'm never again. Why the hell did I go on this? Why? And be like, oh, it's because of my daughter or my wife or something or whatever. It's more likely my daughter, not my wife. But I could see myself only staying there for a short amount of time because it looks kind of boring visually.
Is it that you see yourself there, or is it more like you are there?
Not are there. I don't feel it that much because not something I enjoy, like we talked about earlier. I could see myself in the past putting myself in that similar position. I remember playing a game called The Climb in VR, and I know it's fake, but my body knows it's real, and my hands are sweating profusely. It's like ridiculous. And I keep telling myself, it's fake, it's fake, it's fake. And I'm climbing up and I'm looking down. It's fake, it's really fake. All I am is in my living room. So that particular I can, but like in the carnival scene, it's more like I can put myself there, but I don't feel myself there. It's not like I can't feel the other senses. I can just see myself visually sitting. I can feel my palms sweating. I can feel wanting to get out of it, and then feel myself flying out to then get back down to the corner where the rest of the stuff was. And I'd be like, this was a waste. Why did I come here? I want to walk out and leave. That type of feeling I had when I see that carnival picture, but I don't visualize anything else. It's not like, oh, I'm looking for the cotton candy and I'm looking for all these other types of things. I can now see it as I'm talking about it. Oh, getting cotton candy. And I'm like, man, I spent so much money on that. Why? I mean, but it's not like an exciting feeling. I'm not like feeling, I think the air feels stale in that photo. So I could maybe feel the air being kind of stale. I don't feel like there's a breeze at all. I think that's one of those summers I'm like, we went to go have fun and we're just sweating it out, you know? So that I would say something like that, but it's not like I really feel myself fully present in that visual. It's more like I'm forcing myself into that visual. It kind of felt flat. It kind of felt like 1D. I was throwing myself in there. It didn't even feel 2D or 3D. It felt like I was like between 1D and 2D.
Interesting.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about reading. So when you read a novel, is it like a movie in your mind or something else?
I haven't read a novel in a long time. The one I read that was the most visual to me is my wife's up-and-coming book, Sailing into Surrender. That was highly visual. And she talks about going to this beautiful island, and it has this dock, and it goes about 100 feet in length. And looking on the left and the right, you see these different canoe boats, and people are getting in and out of the canoes and going down the river and everything else. And it was talking about how we try to take control of the canoe in our lives. But sometimes we need to treat it more like a sailboat and allow, this is from a Christian view, the Holy Spirit to take control. And I could visualize that whole story when she wrote it and the excerpts of it. And then I used AI to create some images of it. So then I knew if the image was right or wrong as I was doing it. But it was such a beautiful tapestry of a story. And then when she goes that she went to one of the islands and she was trying to go over and escape the boat because she felt like, I don't need to listen to this voice. You know, it was God's voice leading, but she didn't want to listen to the voice. So she went to the island, and then she met these people and thought they were friendly at first, but they actually were abusive, and they were trying to take captive of her. And she was actually trying to get out of the island. Someone tried to shoot her in the island. She got shot in the ankle. I felt the shot when I read the book in there. I could feel my ankle, because I usually don't feel a touch, but I did, because I've been shot by a BB gun before, so I think that's why I could reference it. I felt myself getting shot in the ankle and felt myself dragging as I was reading that excerpt in the book.
Could you hear the shot?
No, I still can't hear the shot. I felt it and I saw it. And even right now, trying to revisualize it, I could not do that.
Okay. So in general, when you read, would you say it's mostly visual and you don't really hear a lot of sounds or voices?
If it's a voice, I know. If it's an audio book that maybe I read in the past, yes. If I heard someone else read it, I'll hear in their voice. There's a really good book called The Cure by John Lynch. Love his book. I have it like pretty much memorized. And I've listened to his sermon, and he has like a 5-minute version. He has a 45-minute version. I used to quote that, and I could hear his voice going through there, and he's like, 122 times in the New Testament, grace, grace. And it's like, and I know parts of the sermon, so I can hear him preaching that sermon. But when it came to the book at first, before I met him and watched the videos, I would just visualize the tapestry that he talked about in the book, The Cure. But I didn't hear the voices. I think I've always imagined it in my voice. That'd be kind of weird, though. Yeah, I guess that would sound kind of boring, like one person play. Yeah, I guess I'm auditorily boring. Because I'm not hearing in other voices unless I've heard the other voices, and then I can then go over, like, if I heard like a narrator read it or different things. I don't even visualize man versus woman now that I think about it. I have not thought about that before. I just have the same old boring voice every single book. Man, someone wouldn't want my narrated book of that. They'd be like, it's the same voice over and over again. I'm like,
okay. So earlier you talked about how your visualization and your hearing sounds or hearing voices don't really mesh super well.
Yeah.
So what about audiobooks? How does that work? Like if you try and listen to like a novel on an audiobook, does that kind of shut down your ability to visualize it?
Yeah, it does. So what I'll typically do is I like what Kindle does. Kindle has that immersive whisper sync. So I can visually see it reading, and I'm reading it with the audio. So then it gives me that immersive experience. So then the audio is taken over for me. That becomes the voice. But yeah, I will see it more once the audiobook takes over and I'm visually reading it with the Kindle in there. But if I was just listening to the audiobook, I'll pick up nuggets, but I won't pick up as much information. Okay. I mean, unless I'm kinesthetically writing it down, like, oh, that's a good point. So, and if I don't write it down, I usually lose it. So I won't know it. I don't feel it. I don't become the words of it as if it's something transformational, a scripture or a profound book, or even if it's a narrative book. It doesn't become that way if I just listen to the audio. I have to immerse myself both, or I just need to read it visually.
It's time for Aphantasia, the part of the show that lets you chime in and share your thoughts, insights, and experiences.
Hey, buddy. My name's Stanley in Jacksonville, Florida, but I have zero imaging in my head. I actually grew up thinking and being told that I had a learning disorder and a speech disability. Whenever I'm put on the spot and asked to visualize or see something, there's not even words to connect it. I guess it's kind of hard to explain, but listening to your show and podcast actually explained my life a whole bunch and how music actually helped the whole situation. Just figured I'd throw my 2 cents in and say thank you for your show.
If you would like to participate and hear yourself featured on the podcast, go to shanesbraindomain.com and click on the Aphantasia section.
Okay, we're going to talk about sleep and dreams. Let's start with what do you do to fall asleep?
I'll try to read like a psalm or a scripture or some devotion before going to bed. I am watching reels and different things on stuff on the social media. I'm trying to stop that, but
okay. What does the phrase counting sheep mean to you? What's that like?
I tried to do that before, and I would visualize sheep like jumping over whatever I'm looking at in the distance. So they would literally go and then count them. But it's never worked for me per se, because I really like math and counting. So then it just would re-engage me. So it didn't make me fall asleep.
In general, how vivid and detailed would you say your dreams are?
Depends on the day. Some of them are more visual than others. Some of them I can feel. Some of them I can see. Some of them I hear. I feel like it's like an inner voice monologue when it's audio. The visuals are way more powerful than the audio, but I think it's inner voice monologue for me. I think I maybe heard a voice or two in my last few dreams, but I already intermittently sleep. I have back injuries and everything else, so I don't sleep good throughout the night. So
are they typically in first person or third person?
Yeah, I never see myself in this. So first person, I can feel the dream sometimes, but it's more visually seeing everything. Like I said, it's almost like a VR headset to me. And the funny thing is I've only been in VR for a few years, but it feels almost like I'm always seeing something from my eyes and not seeing from anybody else's, unless I can control the dream sometimes. But I've never looked at myself in the dream. I've never done that.
Okay.
Not even a mirror. Not even a mirror, to my knowledge, yeah.
Can you experience all 5 senses in your dreams?
I don't think I've ever experienced smell. I've experienced not taste. Feeling, yes. Visual, yes. Audio is more like an inner monologue. So I'd say 2 out of the 5.
Would you say your dream experience is different from how you visualize when you're awake?
Yeah, I would say that it's random, has a story. Like in the dream, it's random, but has a story type pattern. My visualizations are based on input. So input from my mind, input from the visuals I see, input from the auditory that I take, input of conversations and whatnot, and then input of things that I'm bringing into my stimulus. The dreams, it's not like, oh, I put the stimulus in and then now the dream becomes that. And I'm not planning out my dreams. I'm not trying to work them out. So I would say more random and more intensely vivid in it, but that has a story theme. My stuff doesn't have a story theme unless the input is story theme.
If you want to recall a memory, can you see it in your mind?
Yeah, very quickly. Yeah.
Okay. Do you experience your memories in first person, third person, or both?
I would say a mixture of both. But I don't see myself, or I only see other people. It's like because even if I try to look at myself as younger, I would visualize a picture of myself, but not actually seeing myself. I can create like a 3D image from a picture that I saw of myself, like when I was like 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 years old, and then visualize myself, but it's not like I'm actually truly looking at myself.
When you're experiencing a memory, does it feel like you're reliving the memory or something else?
It feels like I'm not part of it. Yeah, there's a scripture I always remember, and it kind of relates to my life. And it's Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so you know his good and acceptable, perfect will. So I think of myself as a non-conformer. So even looking at my past, I feel like I was like a third-party visitor of it. I don't feel fully immersed and experienced in it. And I've tried to, in some parts of it, I'm like, I don't want to live that past anymore. So I kind of feel like an alien or a sojourner to those memories. And maybe that's why I'm always seeing it from the first person point of view.
What about all 5 senses in your memories? Do any of the other senses come to play in your memories?
I can see my grandmother's food, but I don't taste it. I can remember the feeling of the stairs under my feet and the rail. I can remember myself jumping down the stairs. I can remember the creepy basement that I never wanted to be in.
All right. We're going to talk about mind storage. How would you describe how your mind stores information?
Like a hard drive. I go over and access files and folders. I like NTFS from Windows, the new technology file system. I was an IT geek when I first came in the military. I like this movie, Bruce Almighty, when he goes, I was like, prayers. What do we do with them? Sticky notes. Oh, definitely not. And he's like thinking files, and he puts the files in folders. He's like, oh, someone's going to notice. And he's like, oh, a lock, a key, a computer. And that's how I see my mind, is that way. I try to organize my computer the same way, as like files, folders, different things. And I feel like if there's too much visual stimulus, I have to defrag. If it's audio, I have to defrag. I got to defrag a lot more for audio. So audio conversation is one thing, but if I'm doing with both, it takes me a long time. Like learning how to drive a car was very difficult because you had to do the tactile, you had to do the audio, you had to do the visual. Luckily, you didn't have to smell anything. I would have been hosed. Could you imagine smelling? Like, you can't drive unless you smell. And I'm like, I smell nothing. It'd be horrible. So that's the thing, is like, I like a hard drive. If I get too audibly stimulated with the visual or the tactile touch, if I get overloaded, I'm kind of like a hard drive. I need to defrag and recompress and then go do that. I used to journal a lot to go over and decompress and defrag and everything else. I'm like that. Even the same thing happens at work. If you pull me off something and pull me into something else, and later on you ask me if I did that thing, unless I made a landing point for myself in my mind and also tactically, then I'm not going to get it done. And that's how I can lose emails and lose projects and different things. The ADHD autistic, you have to find some ways to do certain things. So that's why I've had to learn to organize my mind that way. Because if I don't, I'll just be like, ooh, kitty this and ooh, kitty this. And like, I tried 10 things, but I got nothing done.
Do you associate your mind with an area or space?
I see maybe sometimes where in my mind, because I've studied learning in the brain. So when I think of long-term thinking and executive thinking, I think of my front of in my hippocampus. I think of the amygdala with the emotions. I think of the reticulating activating system with the stem in the brain. So I might be visualizing parts of the brain as I'm thinking of parts of the brain. But That's probably the most. It's like, it's not like, oh, this is Candyland and this is chocolate fairies and all these other types of things. I don't think of it in that capacity. It's very linear.
So there's no like rooms or compartments in your mind?
I do rooms and compartments in my life relationally. That's actually part of my brand. We help people from the prayer room to the boardroom. So when I'm thinking about certain people and interactions that way, I think of rooms, but that's about it. If it's like a day-to-day transaction per se, or a thought that comes in my head, I'm like, oh, this is my living room thought, or this is my bedroom thought. It's gotten me in trouble, like on international waters and TV, because sometimes I'll forget which room I'm in, metaphorically speaking, and I'll get a little too comfortable, So like a boardroom conversation, and then you make a joke and you're like, oh, should have said that in the living room, not the boardroom, that type of thing. So I've had to learn how to make those rooms in the sense in my life. I almost lost my marriage because I blended rooms together. I would bring boardroom stuff back in the bedroom. I'd bring living room stuff in the prayer room, and I would just be throwing things in spaces and conversations. So I've had to learn, but it's not natural to me. For me, it's like one big room, and then I'm just trying to organize the files, and I'm not looking at it in different room space, but I've had to learn that. And actually, my brand was built that way, because if we don't do that, that's how we destroy lives sometimes. We'll bring in things and spaces and conversations that shouldn't have been in those places, or maybe they're not ready for those spaces.
All right, last question. If you woke up tomorrow and had aphantasia, how do you think it would affect your life?
I would say drastically, but it's good to at least I have had you guys introduce me to it, and then I had a sampling of my wife, because now that you told me what it is, it would be very hard to, I think, process jokes, process situations, process people's emotions unless you kept memorizing them again and again. I think you'd have to learn some really interesting ways to go over and to adapt. Actually, I'm kind of glad that I learned about this subject, because I could see why my wife struggled in so many things for years until healing came in, because she couldn't do the math. They skipped her math classes. So when she graduated high school, she graduated with just extracurriculars. This is before Common Core and all that other junk. But they literally said, oh, you struggle with this stuff? Well, we're just going to take away this class and this class and this class. Everything that was tactile, she would do. But if anything was abstract, all those classes would just eliminate it. So you become like this, and I don't mean to be mean, you become a denuded person in a sense, because you don't get an even opportunity. They basically took the abstract out. I'm like, that's great if you want to be a plumber. I mean, just tactile things, but it would make it hard for troubleshooting. I think it would make it hard for troubleshooting because you have to go in your mind's eye to visualize what these things are. So I would say, I think struggle-wise, I think it'd be really complicated, but I'm glad that exposed this podcast, and now understanding my wife struggled with that, with understanding the definition. It's helpful, but if you go in there totally blind, in a sense, which now your mind's eye is blind in a sense, it's almost like a very denuded world. And it's like now you're having to, and if you don't have nobody to help to see where you're coming from, I think it'd be a very frustrating thing, to say the least. So that's at least from my perspective.
Okay, that is pretty much it. Is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
I would say thank you for the great opportunity, and that if anybody is, struggling in the metaphoric rooms, as we were talking about, from the prayer room to the boardroom, we are here for our veterans and first responders, and we would love to go over and serve. We might not be able to visualize every single time you're in the rooms, but we're here to help you in those rooms. So, but that's pretty much about it. And it was a beautiful experience and a lot of visuals I got to have.
All right. Thank you. It was so good to meet you, Daniel. It was really fun. And I'm so glad we got to have this.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, follow, and engage with us. And share it with your friends and family as we continue to explore this fascinating subject. For additional information about this episode or Shane's Brain, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening to the Discovering Your Mind podcast. You are beautifully unique.